Welcome back to Between the Pages with Jen, where we journey through the realms of literature, one book at a time. I'm your host, Jannah. So the book we're talking about today is for the people who have an interest in reading about traumatic events and the experiences that come along with that. Of course, by reading such things, depending on your outlook, you can find moral values that are embedded in such books. The book today is, of course, heavy. It was generally a very rough read, yet it also managed to keep me engaged throughout it all, so kudos to the author for that. The book has aspects of abuse, particularly sexual abuse, so trigger warning. And to simply summarize it all, it is about the journey of a young girl kind of overcoming the many vile and heinous things that keep occurring to her throughout her life. The book is Malice by Danielle Steele. Now that I have introduced you to the story of the day, let's slightly delve into the plotline of the book. Grace Adams, 17, high school student, at her mother, Ellen Adams' funeral. That is where the book starts off at. We get a brief introduction to Grace and her family. Her mom, who passed away due to cancer, loved by the town folks. Same can be said about her dad, a former football player, charismatic, handsome, and most importantly, respected. Vastly different to how the people in the town viewed Grace. To them, she was too shy, socially awkward, and all in all, peculiar. She was still undeniably beautiful, of course, even without putting any effort in. The book began by showing us the grief that Grace was experiencing due to her mother's death. She even went as far as to say her mother dying was her final betrayal towards her, leaving her alone. The funeral day was long and weary for Grace, not just mentally for obvious reasons, but also physically, as she had to prepare food, clean, and wash dishes for the funeral. So there Grace was, exhausted, finally alone without any guests around, sitting in her room after she had a long bath. So where do you think the story is headed? For now, we have a kind of stereotypical trope for a certain something, don't we? Respected parents, especially the dad, known as charismatic, likable, totally and significantly different to the daughter who's weird and unapproachable. If you guess that this sounds like the classic characteristics for an abuser and the abused situation, then you guessed right. Not even a day passed from his wife's funeral, here comes Grace's dad, the great respected John Adams, eagerly knocking on Grace's door to sexually assault his own daughter. If you think things can't get even more messed up, you thought wrong, because guess what? The mom supported this. In fact, the mom told Grace when she was only 13 years old to have sexual relations with the dad. I mean, the whole situation is complex actually, because although Ellen Adams is also to blame for all this, she herself was a victim of abuse, both by her own father and her husband, Grace's dad. She was insecure, believed she was nothing and worthless without John by her side, and so she did anything that was necessary to keep him, even if it meant pimping up her own daughter after she couldn't have sex due to chemotherapy. So yeah, this book turned dark quite quickly. Now going back to the story, Grace, naked after having her clothes ripped off by her dad, crying and pleading for him to just stop touching her. Her squeals just made the dad more aroused. He lived for the power he felt whilst doing this to her, which is often what sexual assault is about, right? Power. Although the abuse had been occurring for years, her mother's death felt like a stop line for Grace. She didn't want to comply anymore. If anything, the only reason she slightly cooperated in the past was because of her mother. But she's not here anymore, so Grace is done. Of course, she couldn't simply fight off the dad. He was a man, big and strong. Her attempts to push him off were useless, to say the least. She was dragged, her head was smacked so hard she almost lost consciousness. But then she saw it, the shiny gun that was in the drawer beside the bed that she was in. Can you guess what's happening next? Yes, everyone. Grace did use that gun. Boom, just like that. Dead. She shot him right at the throat. Kind of satisfying to read after the detailed description of the attack and just the messed up years of abuse. You deserve that and so much more actually type of feeling. And so the book got darker. First sexual abuse and now murder. Self-defense murder, but still. When you hear a young vulnerable girl shoots dad as self-defense after being attacked, you would normally expect the said girl to get support, right? No, actually, that is not at all what happens in the book. And the sad thing is, I think this particular situation is quite common. Like I said earlier, the typical characteristics for the abuser and the abused. The abuser will often present themselves well in the public eye, making them, like the book described John Adams, loved and respected, which gives him this power that makes it easier for him to get away with his crimes. And we can see this in real life where often abusers will seek out positions of power to kind of find that loophole that they can take advantage of. Like maybe how teachers take advantage of the trust they have as educators and abuse their students. Or maybe religious preachers who abuse those who come and seek solace with them. So here, we have John Adams, who has all his life lived in this town, being known as someone that is inherently good. Not like his daughter, right? She was insanely weird. I mean, anyone with a brain would be able to understand that just maybe that young girl became weird because she was abused, but apparently these town folks couldn't put the dots together, and Grace was vilified for murdering her father. Also, no, it wasn't just gossiping. Even the police started their investigations on the murder with bias, because it's John Adams. How and why would such a man sexually abuse his own daughter? He could literally get any woman that he wanted in this town. So Grace was doomed, basically. Even after killing her abuser, she was not free from his shackles. His reputation lived past his death, and Grace was eventually thrown into jail. This poor girl, after going through years of abuse from such a young age, is now in jail after defending herself. And so her being in jail triggered this domino effect of awful event after event that this book goes into with great detail. Like I said, it was a heavy read, but the way Daniel Steele described these situations, it definitely was intriguing despite being a bit draining, as some of the things that we read in this book are situations that are 100% plausible, and that's even more scary and in a way annoying to read as a woman myself. Overall, I do recommend this book. If I had to rate it out of 10, I'd give it an 8. Tough read, but to me, the story is worth your time. Alright, everybody, that wraps up today's episode. Thank you for listening to Between the Pages with Jen. Until next time!